Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Whitney Davidson Rhodes, and you are here today to talk with us about a wonderful author talk. We are here with Tabrisha Jones, creator of Cup of Tea with That Book, Please. And we will be in conversation today with Natalie Jenner and to talk about her latest book, Austen at Sea. So thank you all for coming. Um, we are doing a number of other things right now, or you are doing a number of other things right now, but you're here today on this wonderful Sunday. Hopefully it's not too hot where you are, um, for this virtual author event. And after our discussion, there will be some time for Q&A. I will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions that come up during the conversation, please post it in the chat box, and we will do our best to get to all of your questions, and we'll kind of go through a little spiel about what Zoom is for those of you who may not be familiar. On the next slide, any links and resources shared during this presentation will be shared with attendees and on the blog, Cup of Tea with That Book, Please. So please be respectful to all attendees and panelists. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items to review. Um, for those of you that are not speaking, please keep yourselves muted. We love an active chat, but just for time, if you're not speaking or we haven't called on you, please keep yourself muted, and then we'll wait till the end to get to your questions should you want to ask them on camera. Um, but for those of you who may not be super familiar with Zoom, just wanted to go through some features. This is a meet space, so we can see all of you. You can have the option to have your camera on or off, totally up to you. But you will always see Tabrisha's, mine, and Natalie's beautiful faces. Um, if you enjoy what you're hearing in the chat, we love the emoji reactions. So you can click on the smiley face at the bottom and kind of give some kudos, some claps, some thumbs up. We love those. Those are great. All of you some of you are already pretty active in the chat, but that's going to be at the bottom on the right-hand side. And for whatever reason, if you can't understand what we're saying today or just having a little bit trouble following along, we do have some live closed captioning in the CC box. And if you need to leave for whatever reason, again, this is being recorded and we'll send it to you, but you can just hit that leave button should you need to step out for whatever reason. And again, if you need to come back, I will be there to let you in. So just please take a moment to familiarize yourself with these functions while I take the next few minutes to share some information about today's program. And well, normally we have a lot more to say, so excuse me for a little bit of a flub, but because we are here with Natalie, I'm just gonna toss it over to Tabrisha to kind of talk further. And again, thank you all for coming. Over to you, Tabrisha.
Thank you, Whitney. And hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Tabrisha Jones. I am the creator of Cup of Tea with That Book, Please. And I have the amazing privilege to talk to, once again, Natalie Jenner, first time for my blog, to talk about her latest book, Austen at Sea. So thank you so much, Natalie, for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Fabricia. I think this might be the fourth time that we've spoken.
Yes.
I have 4 books. I feel like this is the 4th time, which means I'm incredibly grateful because in such a market full of so many amazing books, and as people that work in libraries know especially, and bookshops, I think I was told 367 books came out on the Tuesday that my book came out. So booksellers were saying it was like Isabella Allende, like these amazing geniuses, and booksellers were saying they'd never seen a release day like that, and it was very exciting to be part of that. And it's also an incredible honor to see readers and people interested in Jane Austen tune in today, like I said earlier, on the weekend. And I'm just very grateful and excited to talk about my book with you. And thank you, Whitney, for steering us over what may end up being choppy waters with the technology in my house with the aircon on high for like 3 days. Anything could happen. So.
And wow, 367 books. I could not even imagine on the same day. That's amazing. But your book not only coming on a day which probably is the most popular publishing day of the year, your book, latest book, Austen at Sea, comes at a very important time of the year for Jane Austen fans, because if most of Austen fans know this, but if you do not know, today, not today, particularly today, but this year in 2025, we are celebrating the 250th birthday of the lovely Jane Austen. So this is also another great event to highlight and to celebrate the great literary author that has made an impact on so many people's lives. So this is also a very great privilege to continue the celebration all the way on to December 16th, of celebrating Jane Austen.
Yeah.
But I want to give a short bio of the amazing Natalie Jenner. So despite publishing her fourth book on a busy publishing year, Natalie Jenner is the author of her debut book, The Jane Austen Society, which was translated into 20 different languages worldwide. And she's also the author of Bloomsbury Girls, which came out in May 2022, and also Every Time We Say Goodbye, which came out last year. The Jane Austen Society was a USA Today and LA Times bestseller, an Indie Next and Libraries Read selections, and was named one of Goodreads and Amazon's best book of 2020. Prior to her late in life career as a novelist, she worked as a corporate lawyer, a career coach, and most recently an independent bookstore owner in Oakville, Ontario, where she currently lives with her family and 2 rescue dogs. So thank you again, Natalie, for joining us today, and congratulations on your 4th book, Austen at Sea.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. You know, I'm excited to talk a lot about Jane today. I was thinking as you were speaking about the anniversary year that I mentioned in a post online that I actually had not really clocked that that was coming up. In 2012, 13, 15, and 17, we had major anniversaries of the 200th publications of the books that had been published in the early 1800s on those days. And we also had, you know, the terribly tragic anniversary of her death, which was in 1817 in 2017. And that was a big 200th year. And when the blogger Austen Prose mentioned to me just casually, so are you writing anything for 2025? And I think it was 2022, like Bloomsbury Girls had just come out. And I was like, oh, right, there's like this huge anniversary year. And I hadn't really, you know, thought about it. And I remember thinking, maybe I will. So that's how this sort of like spark for this book started, because I also knew one other thing. I'm much older than you two. So I knew that this was going to be the last significant anniversary of anything to do with Jane Austen that I'm almost 60, that I was going to get to celebrate in my lifetime. And so that was the genesis for why I decided to write this book for this year.
We're gonna talk about age. Age is nothing but a number.
You're also old.
Yeah.
I think we all feel old right now.
We definitely do.
Seen it, been there, done it. Oh, here we go.
But yes, this, even though it wasn't planned to make for the 250th anniversary, but I think as I was reading this, it perfectly coincides with it, because a lot of with the 2 sisters, and I'm gonna let you give a brief synopsis of the book. There, and also the country in America comes out of the Civil War. It's just coming out of this era of trying to repair a broken relationship.
Yeah.
And it just really kind of coincidentally coincides with what our world is trying to do. And I think how our from past conversations that we had about Jane Austen is like something about Austen that manages to connect people together and bring people together. And I think that's just what is so great about this 250th anniversary, and also what's great about your book is because you're exploring that, how her books and her legacy manages to bring people together either in a small community or across the pond, where we see this in Austen at Sea. But yeah, can you give readers who have not had a chance to read Austen at Sea, can you give us a brief synopsis of what it is about?
Well, it's based on something that I had read about back in 2017. It was a very difficult year. My husband had received a difficult health diagnosis, and I had immersed myself in rereading Jane Austen. And then I started to read a lot about her. And in the fall of 2017, it's all serendipity, this stuff. Professor Juliet Wells released a book called Reading Austen in America. And in that book, she traced the American edition of Emma, its provenance, and how it passed down through different, very interesting people over time, over history. And one of the families that owned a copy of Emma was the daughters of the president of Harvard, Josiah Quincy, at the time. And they write to Sir Francis almost like groupies, asking for signature of his famous sister. And he obliges them, and a pen pal relationship starts up. And this is real. And I remember thinking, that is just so fun and rich. And you could really like spin off in that into a ton of different directions. So what my book is about two very fictional sets of siblings who both correspond with Jane Austen's real life brother, Sir Francis. He's a fictional character in the story. Right as the Civil War is wrapping up and everyone is starting to come out of the grief of the loss of them and the assassination of President Lincoln. And these two sets of siblings, two sisters in Boston and two brothers in Philadelphia, are lured by the promise of a special legacy item of Jane Austen's by Sir Francis, without realizing that he is in his dotage, because he is now in his 90s playing matchmaker, and is very interested in the idea of getting them all on a boat together. There's also a very reluctant chaperone, a colleague of their father's. In my book, instead of being the president of Harvard, I made their father a judge on the Massachusetts State Supreme Court. And that made a lot of sense for a lot of narrative reasons. Also, I try very hard with my stories to be completely keeping them original and made up. So that little kernel that I've given you, everything in my story is made up after that. And I basically get them on a boat, and they go over to England, and comedy and tragedy and romance ensue, and there ends up being dueling court cases across the Atlantic, which played on my former experience, albeit 30 years ago, as a corporate lawyer. Apparently you can leave the law, but it doesn't leave you, because it was all in there. It kind of came pouring out. And there's also, through the book, the analysis of Jane Austen's works done through the lens of a book club of judges. And that was also made up by me, which I believe is probably something that Teresa will want to ask me a bit more about. And that was my gift to people that love Jane Austen. I should say gift, that sounds presumptuous, but that was my effort regarding the readers that love Jane Austen, was here are these very distinct chapters where you could really do a deep dive into how to look at each of her books from a legal, political, social, cultural, feminist perspective. But if you had never read Jane Austen, you could kind of not gloss over them, but you didn't have to really have read Jane Austen, was always my goal with all my books. And especially with the Jane Austen Society, I remember right before the pandemic, I was on a pre-pub tour, and I was in a restaurant with some booksellers that my publisher kindly organized. And there was 4 women sitting around me, and one of them said, "I think this is going to do well." I love Jane Austen and I love it. She hates Jane Austen and she loved it. And she's never read Jane Austen and she loved it. And that has stayed my goal with my writing. And I've tried to do that with Austen at Sea, and I can only hope that I've succeeded. So.
No, you definitely did, because even though I love Jane Austen and I still loved it, Austen at Sea, you can get the sense that it's a book that it's not only just about Jane Austen, but it's also a book about the power of reading,
Yeah.
and how um, when you're reading with other people or discussing books with other people or performing plays in some sort, it just somehow brings you together and entertains you. So I think even regardless if you enjoy Jane Austen or you never read it, it gives everyone something, a little bit of it. And I think that's what I appreciate with all of your books, because you don't necessarily have to either enjoy like a lot of like
Classics.
bookshop, yeah,
Yeah,
classics is,
yeah,
yeah, you
yeah.
don't, you just, it's like an entertaining cast and of robust characters, which you always do with your books, and you have yet again done with the Austen at Sea.
Yes.
and and I think it's just like you did a very great job in bringing, even though the celebration of Jane Austen, but the celebration of books at the same time.
Yeah, that's the bookseller in me. I mean, I studied English literature at undergrad, and I've always loved books, more than anything. And I think I only love writing more than I love reading. So, but I also love film, and I love music, and I love art generally, and architecture and design. And so, what's great about writing historical fiction is that you are immersing yourself in a time period, and you get to learn everything about that time period. And that's background. What I really want when I write is, like, I'm glad that your response was that, Fabrizia, is to create original characters, because I don't know what's going to happen when I write. My characters come to me and I just follow them around, and they surprise me. They surprised me so many times in this book. I did not know about the elopements and things being hidden, and I didn't know any of that while I was writing. But then I would look back and see little clues that I had sort of creatively, subconsciously left myself, which a lot of writers, are familiar with. So that's really, in the end, my books are about my characters and the journey that they're on, and everything else plays a role thematically or mood wise. But I don't think my job as a writer is done well if I don't create characters that readers want to go on a journey with. For 10 to 12 hours of their life. It's writing a book, it's not like a 3-minute song or a 2-hour movie. It is a huge commitment from the consumer. And I feel that they have to really gravitate towards your characters to spend that commitment.
No, definitely. And with the characters you created, you did base them off of, some of them are off of
Yeah,
people, including you have an appearance of Louisa May Alcott,
yeah,
which I found very interesting, um, that you included her, because she was also very, her writing was that not only vastly different from Jane Austen, but also she was very I don't know if it was say opinionated. She was definitely opinionated. Also, and you're dealing with her father as well. And I kind of like learned a lot just
yeah,
from your character creation of
yeah.
Louisa May Alcott. And I wanted to ask, like, how did you know like which real life figures you wanted to include into Austen at Sea? Because the sisters are based on
The Quincy sisters.
the
Yeah,
Quincy
yeah,
sisters, but you didn't include the Quincy sisters
yeah,
in here. But you have Louisa May Alcott, you have the mention of Charles Dickens and Henry James, who is, I think, is like a budding career, because apparently his nose is always in the book. And,
yeah,
and I liked that little Easter egg that you threw in there. It's like, who is this Henry James? And is he going to
yeah.
become someone?
Well, it was easy with this book because this is American Bloomsbury as it was turned by Susan Cheever. I mean, this is an incredibly fertile time in American literary and cultural history. And, Louisa May Alcott knew Emerson and Thoreau and, Hawthorne. And like there was a real kind of cross pollination going on at that time, which you know, you get it with the Bloomsbury Circle in England in the early 20th century. You get it in Paris in the 20s and 30s with the Lost Generation. And it's such a boon for art, because everyone's genius is spurring each other on. So with this book, I never know what's going to happen. So I did not know that I would use a real divorce court judge called Sir Cresswell until I was looking up the court that was going to be making the decision on divorce in London in 1865. And I find out that the first judge of the matrimonial and divorce court in England at that time, his name was Sir Cresswell. And I thought, well, you can't make up a name like that. And there was even a magazine rhyme about him in Blackwell's magazine that I quote in my book. And I remember my husband going, "Did you make that up?" I go, "No, that is a real rhyme. Like, it's in quotes for a reason." Like, I remember being fascinated by the fact that he was a bachelor and he was like disposing of a case a day. And up until this new court, there had been only 300 and some divorces in British history. And, you know, within a few years, they had done like, I think 3,000, you know, in about 8 years. So it's like a transformational time. So that's how he gets in the book. With Louisa May, before I started to write this book, I just happened to be listening to a lot of audiobooks about her. And I think that all the writers in the audience will understand this, is that you think it's serendipity, but often you have put out little feelers in terms of what you're picking to read or watch. You're sort of setting yourself up. So clearly I was thinking about writing about Boston right around the 1860s, right around Little Women time. I knew that that's when I would be writing about these sisters. And I therefore start listening to audiobooks about Louisa May Alcott while I'm taking these long walks. And I find out that she actually took the SS China across the Atlantic in the summer of 1865. She took it a few weeks earlier than my characters in my book do. But when I read that, that was when I went, oh my gosh, I can make her character in my book. It's completely sui generis. It will make sense. Factually, it will make sense that she could be on that boat. Now, what she does on that boat is all fictional and made up. But the fact is, she wasn't living, you know, in San Francisco at the time, running a saloon. Like, she took that boat. And that was my permission as a writer to imagine what that might have been like if she'd come up against my characters at the time in life that she's at, which is she's in her 30s. In those days, that's spinsterhood, you know, like that is how she would have been regarded. She's been writing, but it hasn't really taken off. And I relate to that because it took me until I was 52 to get published. So I related very much to her energy around her writing and the self-deprecation, but also the ambition. And I remember that was how she got into the book. With Charles Dickens, he's not a character. They do the play A Tale of Two Cities. That's one of my favorite 3 books in my life. So I'm sitting there going, did Louisa May Alcott ever adapt Charles Dickens? Yes. And then I'm like, oh, that's great. So she had 4 different performances for charity. They would take his stories and they would take vignettes. And I didn't find anything about A Tale of Two Cities, which almost gave me permission. I was kind of like, oh, she's going to be making this up on the boat. Like, she's going to be writing the script and she's going to be making decisions. So it's actually, I was really thrilled that she hadn't, I didn't find at least anything in her diaries about doing A Tale of Two Cities. So that's how it all happens. It's like really fluid and responsive, and it's so fun as a result. And when I remember with Bloomsbury Girls, if anyone has read that, there was a moment where I had picked Peggy Guggenheim as a character, and she was going to be in that book because of her friendship with Ellen Doubleday. That's why she's in the book. But then when I did deep research on her one day, I found out that she had worked, she had inherited money when her poor father passes away on the Titanic. She inherits like all this money. And I think she was like looking for things to do with it. And I think she considered getting a nose job, but instead she got involved with one of the first all-women bookstores in America. Now, at this point in my book, I'm writing about a group of women that want to run their own bookstore in the 1950s in London. And she's a character. And then I realized that really in history, she had actually done this very thing. And I remember I told my agent that, and he said, the gods just give you this stuff sometimes as a writer, you know, and that's part of the magic. It's so much fun.
That's why it's like, I love hearing you talking about how the deep dive in research that you do and making sure that your historical fiction book really and truly comes to life, because as you're reading it, you're so immersed in it, you feel like you're actually there. And just hearing you talk even more about, even again, about Bloomsbury Girls, but also again, Austen at Sea,
Yeah.
it's just great hearing it again. But I definitely wanted to talk about the Court Justice Judge Book Club, which I found very interesting, because it's like as soon as you open the book, you have all these court justices, like they're talking, and then all of a sudden you just they're trying to figure out like the ranking of Jane Austen's novels, and I was like, wait, where did this come from? This is so enjoyable.
That was the first thing I wrote. I actually, in the fall of 2022, when I being told that this anniversary year was coming up and I was starting to think, I did an event, a virtual event where a chapter of Pride and Prejudice gets read a week. And I was the speaker for chapter 10, I think. And it was with a library museum in Philadelphia called the Rosenbach. And I looked it up to learn more about it. And that's how I discovered that there were these two 20th century brothers who had donated a lot of first editions and papers and things that they had acquired as bachelor brothers to the city for a museum and library to be set up. And so the very first thing I ever wrote was 2 paragraphs. One is about the 2 sisters. It's still in the book. And one is about the brothers, and the lines in that one have been a little dispersed. And other than that, there's no extraneous paper for my book. Like I write a first draft and I add on and I edit, but I don't have like notebooks or things like that. And so what happened with the judges was I was just finished Every Time We Say Goodbye's final manuscript, where they send it off to the copy editor and it's done. And that's considered delivery of the manuscript. And I literally had just finished it. And I'm somebody that likes the project. And so I was like, oh, I'll sit down and I'll just start writing about these siblings. And for some weird reason, I'm talking about these justices. And I realize what they're fighting over. And I'm having so much fun. And I go, oh, this is my entry point into the novel. And in fact, everything in that chapter, everything is going to happen. In terms of the problem of no telegram, the newspapers coming over on the boat, like all this stuff that I'm referring to is all going to become really material to the plot. I just really don't know that yet. And I'm writing this chapter and I feel this feeling building of, oh, I know what they're arguing over. They're arguing over Jane Austen. And where the idea of that came from was the other part of what I knew from Professor Julia Wells' book. So I knew about the Quincy sisters and their father was president of Harvard, but I also knew something else from her book, which is that he introduced his daughters to Jane Austen, not their mother. And he introduced them to Jane Austen because he had heard about Jane Austen and fallen in love with her books from literally the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court at that time and Associate Justice Story, who wrote the Amistad decision. And the two of them are on record with letters going back and forth where they are talking about enjoying Jane Austen's works. And so that was how I guess when I sat down to write the book as a former lawyer, it made a lot of sense to get into that milieu. And that drove the other themes of the plot, the feminism, property, losing your rights upon marriage, losing your citizenship upon marriage, marriages at sea, and like all this stuff is going to be able to be discussed in a way that makes sense because of that first chapter. So, and then, you know, the personal part of the story that I also alluded to on a post online was that I wrote that chapter not really knowing that I was going to write this book. Like sometimes I write a chapter and it sits there for a little while. And I wrote it. And then the next day, Monday, May 8th, I handed in the manuscript for Every Time We Say Goodbye at 12:30 because I finished it. And I don't email my team on the weekend. So I'd held on to it and would send it off. And at 1 o'clock, my doctor calls to tell me that a straightforward operation that I had 10 days earlier showed cancer and that I was going to have another surgery. And it was a real shock to everybody. And the doctors had performed the earlier surgery on the understanding that there was no way this was cancer. And so the doctor has to say, like, never in a million years did we think this could be cancer. And so that was really stressful. And I truly believe that I'm not a religious person, but I truly believe that if we keep putting energy out, and Adam talks about this in the Jane Austen Society, there's a line where it says, I wrote it, I guess I wrote that life won't give up on you if you don't give up on it. And that is really what I wanted to sort of articulate with all my stories, is that by putting themselves out there, by taking trips, by talking to someone that they wouldn't normally talk to, by just putting yourself out there, increases the chance of serendipity happening. There's a nexus there. And so by writing this chapter with no expectation of a deal, no expectation that there would be a book out of it, no expectation that it would go anywhere, that my publisher would even want it. Like, I didn't know. I wrote it. I wrote it for me, which is how I always first start writing books. It's purely for what I want to do with the next 2 to 3 years of my life. And I'm so grateful that I wrote it when I did, because this is no exaggeration. After we raced into the city, saw the doctor, called my parents, called my daughter, the next morning I woke up and I was like, oh, thank God I have this chapter 1 done. And I've got something to build on, because I don't know that I could have created in that moment something from scratch, but I had something to build on. And that was such a gift. And that is why it's so important, despite what's going on in the world, to keep creating and learning and growing and connecting and, just keep putting stuff out there, because there's no guarantee on anything. But as a career coach, you can probably hear that right now. And there's a famous line that I used to quote where I would say, looking for a job, it's kind of like being in a snowstorm, and you have to keep going. And if you stop, you'll just freeze to death, right? Like, you have no choice. And I was so grateful that this book was waiting for me. And I worked on it up until the day before my operation. And I picked it up the second day of recovery. And I had so much fun. Oh my gosh, guys, like, I can't tell you, like, I would sit there and I would be rereading Tale of Two Cities, and then I would pick which chapters do I want them to do on the boat, like that they'll turn into a play. And so I was in my happy place of both Charles Dickens, Louisa May Alcott, and Jane Austen, like the ultimate trifecta. Right? And I created this world for myself, and that I can only hope that readers who are looking for distraction and entertainment and comfort, that this behavior in life can yield meaningful reward and recompense. We'll find that in this story. Now, I wrote it fast. I write fast, always the first draft. And I finished my books. And people in my life are like, what do you do after you finish the book? You write so fast. I go, I spend a year doing the friggin' research. I don't do it while I'm writing. And then it's, what do you include? What's important to include? Do you really need to include that? So that's the process of writing, is so magical, so wonderful.
That's amazing, Natalie. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I think, and just like you're getting a lot of praise in the chat, like someone says, like,
I haven't really talked about it. I didn't want talking about it to be connected with promotion and sales. Do you know what I mean? So I wanted enough time to have gone by that it would be talked about, because I felt that I haven't talked about it before. This weekend feels like an important time to talk about it and to give people some hope, like, it's a very difficult time in the world for so many different people. And it was a really difficult time in 1865 for America. It was a really difficult time for Black Americans, especially. And I didn't feel with this book, given the time period, what I wanted to write about was the importance of the law. And that impacts everybody. And I did it through the lens of these young girls, basically, right? They're young unmarried sisters, and they have a life of privilege, and they have everything, but they don't have education, because in those times, even privileged young women were often just educated at home, and certainly were not allowed to attend college or law school. And so it was, you know, that interesting thing of being still the most privileged person in your society, except for one other person, which is a man, a white man, right? And I really wanted my story to show people who are feeling powerless or disenfranchised, staying true to themselves, and through that authenticity, finding strength for a larger battle ahead. And I think that that is another message I really want to come across in my books, which is Jane Austen's message. So to go back to Jane and what we were talking about in your intro at the very beginning, I think Jane Austen is ultimately writing about community and authenticity. She is writing about the importance of supporting and elevating others, especially those less fortunate. And she is writing about how important it is to not only know yourself, but to persevere with what you know to be true, which will yield resilience and strength. Jamie Oliver, the chef, was in a Netflix documentary recently, and he was talking about that he thinks the measure of a great country, because gosh knows what greatness is, right? In a country. I mean, how do you define that? But he said, I think the measure of a great country is one that takes care of the least fortunate. And, you know, that's, I think, a really, really powerful message. And I think Jane Austen is really channeling that in the picnic scene in Emma, when the heroine, the protagonist, is making fun of an older woman who is impoverished. And her love interest, future love interest, takes her to task afterwards and says, there was a time when she was your equal, you're better, you know? You were born into a village in which she was already an elder, and she has fallen, and you're just kicking her when she's down. And, you know, that was, I just think, to me, that is the moment, you know, Emma is her fifth book before Persuasion. I think that you see the thread from that moment in Persuasion, which is that Anne Elliot's not getting the respect that she deserves from her family. And what she finds is community of sailors, and this new life of Wentworth and his sister and her husband, and this entry into their lives of Captain, you know, Benwick and all these people. And you see her coming into her own through the authenticity of their bonds. They're not familial. There are bonds that have been forged at work and in battle and through sacrifice and looking out for each other. And she is elevated by that and finds strength. It's never expressly said by Jane Austen, but she's deriving strength from the new people in her life to be stronger herself about some difficult choices about her family and her social milieu. So I think that that's what Jane Austen gives us now. As a writer of a book of commercial fiction in 2025, I aim to entertain and to distract and give people their money's worth. And like, just, I really want people to eat it up. And you know, this is why I write. Jane Austen, what I love about Jane Austen is we know from the few letters we have is how much she loves sharing her work with her family and talking to Cassandra and like reading aloud parts. And I do that too in my stupid little books. You know, like every morning I write a chapter, and then my husband and I have coffee, and we like sit here and I read it to him, and he laughs, and I go, it's good, right? Like I get really excited. And then I write the next chapter the next day because I've had this audience. And I think all writers benefit from that, especially if you're lucky to have a supportive family or spouse or partner around you. But I do think that my books are on a spectrum, and at one end, but at the other end is the works of a genius like Jane Austen. And why we celebrate her is that, like Shakespeare, she has an eye of God. She sees it all. She conveys it all. She has layers and layers and layers of meaning that are bottomless, that we are still able to continually adapt to the world as it changes as we know it, but also to adapt our own growth as humans too, because we change as we get older, and her books change with us and give us new lessons. So she is like Shakespeare. Really, he's the only other one I can compare her to, because they both are just these beating geniuses that will always live with us and have outlasted. And you know, and Dickens is up there. There's not many where they're still such an important part of our reading culture and our plays and our movies and things like that. People just continue to be as delighted by them and entertained and inspired as they ever were. And that is, I think, why we celebrate her. And that's why she's so important to me.
I do want to interject with a kind of circling back to your commentary on community and authenticity. I think I said that right.
Yeah.
I'm not as big of a fan as you or Teresa or the people in this community of Jane Austen, but I do appreciate and recognize that you guys have built like this very intentional community,
Yeah.
and corporate jargon of circle of community of
There's
practice.
some of them on here. Like I can see them commenting as we're talking.
So I
Hi,
guess,
Sarah.
and yes, thank you all for joining us
Yeah.
again. But I guess my question, as well as I'm going to try and put it, is how do you foster this community? How do you, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Austin specific, but how do you think folks should go about fostering these types of communities based
Oh,
off
it's a great question,
common?
Whitney. Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. I mean, first of all, the Jane Austen Society of North America has chapters everywhere, multiple regional chapters. There's an East Pennsylvania region chapter of Jasna, like so, and some of them are really active. I've been to meetings in New York, Philadelphia, LA, and they have, not only do they have regular meetings, well, they'll have interesting speakers. That is such, for a pure Jane Austen perspective or experience, that is like such an incredible way to immediately meet like-minded people. And they do tons of, like, they'll do book clubs and special lectures and special teas and events and lots of different things to choose from. Like I've been to several in New York that they've let me attend, even though I'm not a member. And they have like Christmas birthday party for Jane Austen, like just really really fun. And I've enjoyed all of that. And that has been, you'll find this interesting, but when I turned 50, before I'd ever thought about writing the Jane Austen Society, I said to my family that the Jane Austen Society of North America's East Pennsylvania region is doing a special annual general meeting on persuasion for the year, for their AGM for the year. And it's going to be at this golf and country club. And I've never been to Philadelphia and I want to go. So I literally just bought tickets and took my daughter, who was, I think, 15 or 16 at the time. We dive bombed this Jasna AGM and we sat in this beautiful room and had lunch and met people there who have continued to be in my professional life as an author. And one of them, ironically, runs the programs at the Rosenbach and invited me to do that week analysis of Pride and Prejudice that led me to learn about the two brothers, that led me to have two brothers in my book. So another example of how going to meetings like that will yield just lots of different new experiences and connections. So from a pure Jane Austen experience, I think that's one way. There's also, frankly, I am a member of many fan forums. It's like Frasier, Northern Exposure. I mean, there are just wonderful Louisa May Alcott, women writers of the 19th century. Like there's wonderful fan forums. And I have met people through a shared passion for something. And if you think about it, Whitney, isn't that like when we're young and you go to someone's birthday party when you're 8 and I'm dating myself here, but like they loved Happy Days or they loved Cheers or Charlie's Angels or whatever. But then when you're a teenager and you would go to a party and you would meet someone and they also love General Hospital or they also love the Thornbirds or whatever it was at that time in my life, that often was just a shorthand to understanding that they might have the same goofy sense of humor, or they might be also a romantic, or they might be also, you know, and that similarity. So I think that's the great thing that we discovered, especially during the pandemic, is that it is that shared love of certain things that got us through the pandemic, and that it was the virtual ability to connect over those shared things, was a gift, and is one of the, you know, I think one of the great gifts of technology is that we can connect and stay connected with people no matter how far away they live or how different from us they are. And so I don't think in practice it always turns out that way, but those would be, you know, my immediate suggestions for finding people that you can bond with over these types of experiences in life. Yeah.
So there is something that we usually do with our special guests. It's this or that. We usually do a bookish edition, but we thought, why not do a Jane Austen edition? And these, some of these prompts are courtesy of austenvariations.com. So just want to give them a shout out because it was very good. And I did not need to change or add a thing because they were very, very good. So you can choose which scenario you prefer, and I encourage our audience members to join in because it's always fun to see the various of different answers that people prefer. So I'm going to read the first one. So read each of Austen's works only once more, or only be able to read Pride and Prejudice, but as much as you want.
Pride and Prejudice as much as I want. For sure. No, no question. Because I do not, I can read those books, all of them in a month. I don't plan on being done with Jane Austen in a month. So it has to be the second.
Okay. Be best friend with Mary Crawford, or be wooed by Henry Crawford.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Well, wooing doesn't mean a natural conclusion. So I'll say wooed by Henry Crawford. In fact, Henry Crawford is one of the most interesting characters I find in Jane Austen because, and I think he's in the 1998 Mansfield Park adaptation. Patricia Rozema, the Canadian director, has a scene in the dock, you know, where Fanny's family lives, and these two young boys come with all the birds in the wind-up music box and everything, and it's so beautiful, visually beautiful, and so charming. I You don't waste that on someone that's just like a total scoundrel. I think that I am fascinated by Henry Crawford in terms of his character's evolution and the arc and where Jane Austen was heading with that, because she wrapped stuff up in Mansfield Park in a really quick and not her typical way. And I've always wondered if there was if she was falling herself susceptible to his wooing as a character, which happens, right? I mean, it does happen with writers. So, and they start getting better and better lines, and you start spending more time with them, and then you decide they won't die, and things like that. So, not that Henry Crawford dies, but so yeah, I think being wooed, even though like obviously nothing would happen, but being wooed by Henry Crawford.
Elope with Wickham, or be dumped by Willoughby.
Oh my gosh. Oh, dumped by Willoughby, because I have no time for either of those sociopaths.
I agree with that because if you elope with Wickham, you're stuck with him. So be a Bennet sister or an Elliot sister.
Oh, be a Bennet sister. I mean, for all the flaws of the parents, they're regular parent flaws, you know? And there's each of those sisters has a lot to offer in their own way. And it's definitely a family unit that I think everyone can relate to. Whereas the Elliot family in Persuasion is um,
Awful.
awful, really awful, really
So,
awful, like abusive, emotionally
yeah,
abusive.
yeah,
Really,
yeah.
yeah, really awful. Yeah.
Now, speaking back to the Elliot and Bennet family, and I think this is very interesting. Have Sir Walter Elliot as a father or Mrs. Bennet as a mother?
Oh, Mrs. Bennet as a mother, for sure. I think that Mrs. Bennet is she's not behaving any differently than someone who is high strung in her situation would behave. Whereas Mr. Elliot he's on a whole other level of narcissism, right? Like that is not normal. So I'm always for being around people that are doing their best within the constraints that they've been given.
Sorry about that. Either have Mrs. Bates for an aunt or Fanny Dashwood as a sister.
Oh, Mrs. Bates for an aunt, for sure. Fanny Dashwood is another one that is just pure selfishness, like no redeeming qualities. That's not Mrs. Bates, or it's Miss Bates. I'm assuming you're saying, or did you mean the mother? Was it Miss or
I
Mrs.?
I think this was a typo. I think it's supposed to be Miss Bates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would just use my earbuds a lot.
I know, right? Yeah. But you have to assume that there's no technology.
Oh,
So
right. Yeah, no, I'd still rather deal with that than someone like Fanny.
I know, because Fanny, I feel like I would just ignore, I'll try to ignore Fanny,
Yeah.
but I think it would be very useful to ignore Fanny in the 21st century because it's like you said, I could just put my earbuds.
Yeah, and you know what? As you're talking, I'm kind of thinking like this is like a fun game, but at the same time, you are hitting on something else with Jane Austen, which I think is something that I gravitate towards in all my entertainment, whether it is something like Frasier or Northern Exposure or whatever, is absence of malice. You know, like I will forgive a lot if there's no malicious intent. And I think that a lot of the examples that you're giving, the choice is between someone who is a pain to be around, but is not malicious. And I think that's the world that Jane Austen wants also for us as well.
and and I think this is like a perfect segue to this one because I have these are two problematic characters, but they're considered to be heroes. But there's one that I particularly don't like. Accept Edmund Bertram's proposal or accept Edward Ferrars' proposal.
Oh, Edward Ferrars' proposal for sure. Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, he made some mistakes, but in the grand scheme of life, I think he was doing his best. Really, um, Edmund really is much more kind of complex. I don't think he's malicious, but there is some selfish moments with Edmund. There is some selfish preferring going on, and some forgetting of Fanny and the relationship that they have. That yeah, it doesn't appeal to me. That the Edward's just honoring his word. You know, he's a man of honor. I didn't feel that as much with Edmund, even though they're both going to be men of clergy. I felt it
Yeah,
much more with Edward Ferrars.
yeah, because I'm not a big Edmund Bertram fan.
Yeah,
I just don't like it. It's like exactly what you said. It's like he's selfish. It's like
yeah,
no, like Fanny, you could do so much better.
yeah,
Like go
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, yeah.
And I have one more, and then we'll gear towards audience questions. Have to listen to Lady Catherine's advice or listen to Mary Musgrove complain.
Oh no, listen to Mary Musgrove play. Lady Catherine de Bourgh is she is I don't think there's a single moment where she's not looking at everything from the lens of her own power, her own comfort, what she wants to do. If someone playing the piano badly, I can handle that. Lady Catherine she's another one that she's just too much of qualities that I just don't want to have to be around or honor or tolerate.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Even though it's again, you have to choose the lesser of two evils because
Yes.
they're both horrible. No, Rose, I meant Mary Musgrove,
Ben,
not
did you
Mary.
done some? Yeah, you meant Mary Musgrove in Persuasion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Natalie. That was that was a fun game.
That's fun. Yeah.
So
Wait,
so now
wait.
go ahead.
I own Colin Firth or Matthew McFadden. That's all
Colin Firth.
Of course, that's the answer. But but I also like Matthew McFadden.
I
So
like them both. I like them both a lot. I
yeah.
like them both like a huge amount. Like, nobody's going to want to hear this from me today, and this will be how we end this, is that I think it's always your first love. And I came of age, I was 12 years old in 1980 when Australia's and BBC and the Australia Broadcasting Company came out with a very old version of Pride and Prejudice with David Rintoul and Elizabeth Garvey. And that, for whatever reason, if I could only watch one on a desert island, that's the one I would watch. And so then he has to be, by essence, inevitably my Mr. Darcy, but Colin Firth, between those two. Yes.
Yeah, I do like Matthew McFadden, but I grew up with Colin Firth.
Yeah, no, it is. It's like,
Yeah.
I think it's like a first love. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those questions were awesome. So fun. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Thank you. So we did ask our attendees when they were registering if they had some questions for you, and a couple of them did fill out the form with some questions. So one question was, how did your interest in Jane Austen start?
Oh, I just found a book on my parents' shelves, which is why I highly recommend that people buy books and have them lying around, and not just on Kindle, not just the library, like also have them tactile, because that's how I discovered this version of Pride and Prejudice. And I remember reading it, and right away, I'd never read anyone. I was young. I think I was like 9, but I'd never read anybody where it felt like they were in my head. Like there was just this immediate connection with the decision of her prose, of the sentence structure, the rhythm of the sentences. It felt like music. It was easy to read, even though it was very lengthy. I also feel that way when I read Henry James and Edith Wharton. There's just a certain style to her writing that resonated with the way my brain works. And that's how my interest started. And it just took off from there.
Great. Yeah, my interest was my mom introduced me to Pride and Prejudice. For the 1995 adaptation, and I think that's why Colin Firth is just someone I absolutely love. And when she told me that it was based off a book, I was like, what book? And she brought me a copy of Pride and Prejudice, and she would help me, because I was young. I was 7 or 8.
That's
and
young. Yeah.
I couldn't understand some of the text, but she would help me read some of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next question is, on your website, you state, all of my books are not coincidentally about how art can connect us and comfort us and even save us in challenging times. How has the process of writing your novels made this true for you too?
Well, I'm never happier than when I write. So to wake up every morning at 5 and to know, like, I can't wait. And a lot of writers are like this. You can't wait to get to your laptop, and, sometimes like you don't even like make yourself a cup of tea. Like you just can't wait to get back into this world. So for me, the act of writing my books has given me something. This is the first summer since 2017 that I'm not actively working on a book that somebody wants, so it's a different feel for me for the first time 8 years. So for 8 years, but especially in the summers when the light comes through the window so early, and like slipping downstairs and sitting outside in the garden and working on my books has given me, especially as an empty nester whose daughter left for university in 2018, and has not come back. I mean, like, she's gainfully employed and has her own life. I'm a true empty nester. So it's given me, I don't want to say a reason to get up, but a wonderful thing to get up for. So that is part of what it's given me. But the act of being published has been a great privilege and a great joy for me, because it has connected me to hundreds, if not thousands of people around the world through book clubs and presentations and social media and the kindness of other authors as you are starting out in this business, and the mentors, the people that, especially, the past couple years, Kristen Harmel, has just, like, there's been certain writers who have just been incredibly giving of their experience and life lessons, in times of challenge for themselves as well. So, I think coming out of the pandemic, the connections I've made with other people, and also having to not travel, because my husband has a rare form of lung disease. So life will always be, and had always been, even before the pandemic, life will continue to be a little more constrained for us, physically, in terms of travel. So my books have opened up so many worlds to me that I would never, ever have gotten to see or meet people that it's mind blowing to me. Just absolutely. My husband and I say this regularly, that we can't really believe any of this happened. Like, it feels like it's happened to somebody else, because it's almost too new and foreign and different and exciting and unexpected than my brain would have ever thought was going to happen to me in my life. And so, yeah, my books have given me the world. It's been absolutely wonderful.
That's great. Thanks, Natalie. And then we have another question that was entered in chat by R.L. Herskowitz. Does your daughter think she wants to be a novelist?
She already is. She's unpublished. She's way better than me. I think she's working on her 4th or 5th novel. She started out doing a double major in math and English literature, and it was the fall of 2018, and my book went up for auction in New York, and the major publishers are bidding for it. And she was like, math's okay, but I really want to do what you're doing. And you said I could never make a living out of it, and now you're selling your book. I was like, oh. So she ended up getting a degree in English literature and then did her MA in creative writing. She is working in development for a cultural institution in Toronto, but she works on her books as well. And I mean, yeah, she is, I know all parents will say this, but like, she is, I think, the reason I was a writer, is so that she could be a writer. And like, she's really, really especially talented. So, and everyone around her says that. So it's so exciting. And I'm really, I love what she writes. And also, one other thing before we go is, my husband loves everything I write, which on the one hand is not great, because I have an agent and an editor to rein me in. But, it is really great. And I appreciate when people like you read my books, and the people that are watching today, like, that is why I write. Like, I write for you guys, right? Like, I write for the readers out there that reach out to me and go, I love the story. I want more of these characters. Like, there's no more great feeling than to feel that people are enjoying what you write. And you need, as an artist, you don't get the interaction that, other artists get necessarily as a writer. It's a very lonely, and you could do the whole experience of a book and never actually talk to anyone in person if you chose to not promote, right? So it's a very quiet form of entertainment that way. You don't get that performance buzz necessarily, but we write for all the people that come forward to us and tell us how much they love the way we write. But there's something about the way we tell a story that's resonating for them. on some spectrum of how Jane Austen resonated for me. And so that's another great privilege in life, is to be published so that you can reach a lot of readers, then get that feedback, and that enables you to write more. So
Everyone keep giving Natalie that feedback, good feedback, so we can get more stories from her. And speaking of more stories, this was an audience question, but also one of my questions. What are you currently working on?
Well, I just finished my first short story ever. I've never written a short story in my life. I'm not a short story writer. I'm a novelist. Like, I'm only interested in a bunch of characters over a long period of time, duking it out for 300 pages. So I wrote a short story about Jane Austen's final days as a writer in the cottage in Chawton as she's working on Sanditon. And it's going to, I haven't announced it yet. It's going to be part of an anthology coming out this fall for the anniversary year. A book, a collection of different types of writing, not just fiction. And yeah, so I just finished that. And I'm playing around with a piece of historical fiction that's set in 1970s New York, so much more modern, which I'm having a lot of fun with, and does deal in some ways with the American Bloomsbury writers again, not in a dual timeline kind of way or anything like that, but yeah, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. From a timing perspective, I usually have a book come out every 2 years. This book came out because of the anniversary year, and because I wrote it when I did. Like, I wasn't planning to write it as quickly as I did and when I did. And so I'm trying to just sort of really do a bit more of a slow movement for the next year, just sort of really, really go back to the well, fill up the well again with lots of great books to read and movies and music and see what sort of lights my fire again. So that's where I am right now.
That's great. And I think I did see there was going to be a Jane Austen anthology of short stories from different writers. And I do remember saying it was coming in like October or November. So I'm really excited.
There's more than one. There's more than one. So
okay.
Yeah.
So we have more Jane Austen to look forward to.
We're gonna have lots of Jane Austen. Let's just go for broke.
Exactly. So Natalie, as always, it's wonderful talking with you. This was such amazing conversation. You have so much insight to give to your readers and to prospective writers out there. So thank you again for coming on and joining me in this conversation, and Whitney. Don't want to leave out Whitney in joining in this conversation. So we do have one last question. So we will like you to do like a 30-second, 1-minute elevator pitch for Austen at Sea, to give people who have not had a chance to read it, or they're going to go out their local bookstore or library to get a copy of it. So whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Don't time me. Austen at Sea is a romp that is rooted in an interesting time in history and follows a cast of very different characters as they travel from Boston to England to meet Jane Austen's last surviving sibling, who is the secret caretaker of part of her legacy. And it is a story about female agency and the spontaneity of love, and how to outsmart your chaperone on a boat. And it's a story about a time in America when people were starting to think about new frontiers in law and society that they should stretch for and fight for. So it is a story as well about women's rights and about the women in America at that time and their strength of spirit, as well as the strength of spirit of Jane Austen as a writer and how she will live on through her works in the lives of these characters. So.
Perfect. we always make an example of another author that we've interviewed in the past where they were just like, here's my book, read it. So it was perfect. I think it summarized the book very well and quite lovely. And before we launch into our closing stuff, again, thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
We will be sharing links and a link to this recording afterwards in a few days.
Great.
Yes, so you heard it here. Austen at Sea by Natalie Jenner is available in bookstores and at your local library. We're going to enter the links into the chat, and also you can visit my blog where you can get affiliate links. If you click on any of the affiliate links, I do get a commission, but I only link books that I absolutely love, and this is one of the books that I absolutely love. So you make sure, if you're looking for a book to celebrate Austen's 250th, Austen at Sea is a perfect selection for your collection. But also get any of Natalie Jenner's books, her debut novel, Jane Austen Society, Bloomsbury, and then following up with Bloomsbury Girls, and Every Time We Say Goodbye. All of these are available in print, ebook, and e-audiobook format in your local bookstore and libraries. And you can also check out book reviews on my blog of these titles if you want to see more of my thoughts about these amazing books. And if you are looking to celebrate more of Austen at her 250th birthday, there are tons of Austen-related events that are happening across the world. If you are local in New York City, if you visit the Morgan Library, you have the exhibit, A Lively Mind, that's running until September. It is worth a visit. It is curated by Juliet Wells. So it is very a great exhibit, and just really dives into the legacy and her genius of Jane Austen. But we also have the Jane Austen Society of North America, the Chawton House, the Jane Austen House. There's a slew of different events that are happening in 2025. And it's a great way to just keep on celebrating Jane Austen. But that is the end of today's program. So we want to give a big shout out to Natalie. Thank you so much again for joining us. This was, again, a wonderful conversation. Please take the time to follow Natalie on social media. She is on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. And also you can subscribe to through her website, and you're entering those links into the chat. And also please take the time to follow Cup of Tea with That Book, please. We're on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and we also have a Spotify podcast if you want to check that out as well. So we're a very busy bunch of people. So thank you everyone for taking time in this hot, I hope it's cool where you are. It's definitely hot in Canada and New York City. Please stay cool. Enjoy the beginning of summer. I hope everyone has an enjoyable summer. I hope everyone has an enjoyable Jane Austen 250th. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.